Many of you would have walked into a church like this at some point, and you probably marvelled at the massive space and the beautiful architecture, and perhaps you walked down the nave and got to the organ, a key part of most churches and an instrument that is usually found within a church. And perhaps you looked at the instrument and had quite a lot of questions. If there was an organist playing, you probably wondered where the sound came from. You probably asked why there are so many buttons surrounding the organist, and why the organist was not only playing with their hands, but with their feet. But fear not, because today I'm going to be showing you exactly how a pipe organ actually works. So the very first thing to know about a pipe organ is that pipe organs run on air, compressed air. So most organs fall into either one of two categories. Firstly, a tracker action organ, which basically means that the entire organ design is mechanical. So the air is pumped through with a blower, and then when you push down on a key, the air is sent into the certain pipe that the key corresponds to, and that's how sounds are made. You also have the second category, which is the electro-pneumatic organ. Electro obviously relating to electricity, and pneumatic relating to air or wind, like pneumonia. So with an electro-pneumatic organ, you're still relying on air, you're still relying on compressed air, but not only does it rely on the mechanics of the organ, but it also has an electrical side to it, which means that you can actually place the pipes away from the console. So a tracker action organ, the pipes and where the sound comes from will be right next to where the keyboards are. With an electro-pneumatic organ, because you have electrical signals that are being sent from the console to the pipes, you can actually place the pipes away from the console. So that allows you to have an organ which can be moved around or can be put in a different place within the church. So the organ I'm going to be showing you today is the Compton organ of Downside Abbey. It's a very, very beautiful organ, one of the best organs I've ever played. The sound is stunning, absolutely stunning. It fills the space very, very well because of how it's been designed, but I'll get into that in a bit. But this is an electro-pneumatic organ, so it means that the console is down here, downstairs in the nave of the church. But whilst the console is downstairs, the pipes are actually up behind this wooden casket here in the pipe chamber. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different pipes up there. And I'll be taking you up there shortly to show you what the pipe chamber looks like, what the organ chamber looks like, and how the sound is translated from the console down here up to the pipes up there. So I'll be talking to you about the different keyboards here shortly, but first you just need to understand that you have different sounds around the keyboards here, and these are called stops. As you can see, there's many different buttons. If I press them, they light up, and that means that that corresponding stop is now on. And if I then play a note on the right keyboard that corresponds to the stop that I've just pressed, you get a sound. And the more stops I add, the louder it will become. So this very fine Compton organ that has 4 manuals. So we call keyboards manuals in the organ world. They can sometimes have different names, but generally in the UK we have a solo manual, and this usually has lots of solo sounds. So for example, a tuba. We also have some very, very nice flute sounds. So there's plenty of different sounds. Then at the bottom we have the choir, which again tends to have some very nice solo sounds, such as a clarinet. We also have some more reed sounds, more trumpety sounds. And then the 2 main manuals in the middle here, these are the 2 manuals that are found on most organs throughout the UK and in the world. We have the swell, which is the one above this one here. We have the swell. and then below that we have the grate. The swell and the grate are the two most commonly found manuals in most organs, on most organs. Some organs only have one manual, most have two, some have three, and some have four, some even have five, and even higher. But basically, the more manuals you have, the more sounds it allows you to put onto the organ. So as you can see from the buttons around me, there are lots of different stops, and obviously you can't put all of those sounds into one keyboard. You want to be able to contrast sounds, and if you had them all on one keyboard, then obviously you wouldn't be able to make that contrast. So you want to have different sounds on different manuals so that you can, you know, play a clarinet whilst also playing strings. So you want lots of different sounds that you can contrast. Again, you could have a trumpet with a very loud, great accompaniment. So the four manuals basically allow you to have lots of different sounds at your disposal, and you can use them at the same time without them clashing. And because there's so many different sounds available to you, that's why the organ is known as the king of instruments, because there's so many different sounds. You basically have an orchestra at your fingertips, and I like to say that the organ is the king of instruments because it is all the instruments. And you are basically, in a large organ like this, you have a whole orchestra at your disposal. You have strings, you have flutes, you have trumpets, trombones, an oboe, clarinet, all of these different sounds combined into one place, so you can create a very orchestral sound, which is why a lot of orchestral music sounds so good on the organ. So the next thing to do is to explain to you how it is that when I press a key on the console down here, a sound then comes out from the pipes upstairs. When I press down a key on the console, an electrical signal is being sent from the organ down here, from the console down here, up to an electrical board up in the organ chamber, and then that corresponds to a certain pipe, and the compressed air that I mentioned at the beginning is then sent through that pipe, and that's how the sound is made. The pipes are all different sizes, as we'll see when we go up. They're all different sizes, and they're designed in different ways so that they can make the different sounds. All of these different metal outputs here correspond to different sounds. There's many, many more within the organ here itself, and then there's a corresponding electric board upstairs, and so the electrical signal is sent from the console here under some wires on the floor that go along here, under some wires along the floor that go along here, go under the floor, and then they go up into the chamber up there. So that's a kind of basic view of how the mechanics of an organ work, especially this organ itself, an electro-pneumatic one. Before I get into the console itself and going into a bit more depth as to why we use our feet and to the different pedals down at the bottom. Got some pedals down here. We've also got buttons underneath each manual. Before I get into that, I'm going to take you upstairs and actually show you what the organ chamber looks like. Okay, so I'm now stood at the side of the Abbey, just outside the pipe organ chamber. There's two rooms that I'm going to take you into. You might be able to hear some of the wind. It's quite noisy, and it'll be even noisier in the room itself. So to the right of me, there's actually a door. That is where the organ blower is kept. It's a massive, massive thing, and it's probably about 3-4 meters in length. It's also very, very tall, and that's the machine that compresses the air, and that air is then sent into these chambers, and then the air from that compressor, from that blower, is then sent into the pipes when a key downstairs is played, and that's how the sound is created, as I said before. So I'm going to take you up into the chambers now. If you look here, there are lots of electrical magnet kind of looking things, and these correspond to the electrical board downstairs. And so the electrical signals that are sent from downstairs are sent up to the electrical board here, and that's how the pipes up here know which sound to play. It's a very, very complicated piece of kit. John Compton was clearly a very, very ingenious builder. So the pipes are actually up here, so I'm going to climb up this ladder and I will show you the pipes themselves. Well then guys, I've made it up, and I was going to stand the camera somewhere, but actually the flooring, as you can see, is quite a lot of gaps, so I'm not going to do that in case the stand falls through. But this is one of the chambers, so as you can see, hundreds of pipes surrounding me, all of different shapes and sizes, and these all create different sounds. You have very small pipes over here, You can probably hear the wind blowing as well. I don't know if my mic's picking it up, but there's a constant supply of wind. And all of these different pipes correspond to different sounds. You've got some huge ones over there. Those will probably be large pedal sounds that create very bassy sounds. So you've got all of the different textures, and that's why there's so many different sounds available on a mighty organ like this, because you've got all these different shapes of pipes, you've got all these different sizes of pipes, so you can create lots of different sounds and combine them all together. Thankfully there's no music playing at the moment, but if there was, it would be very, very loud up here. It's very, very loud downstairs, playing at full volume, so up here it would be very, very loud. You've got shutters here at the top. Now these shutters correspond to a pedal downstairs, and when that pedal is opened, the shutters also open. And so when that pedal is opened, the sound into the church becomes louder, because obviously the sound is able to travel out better. So when this shutter is closed, the sound is slightly more muffled, and that's how you can control the volume as an organist. Because there's a constant supply of air, it's not like playing a piano. When you play the piano, the loudness depends on how hard you press the key. But with the organ, you can tap the key very lightly, or you can press the key very, very hard. The volume is going to stay the same because the supply of air is constant. So it's things like this, designs like this, which allow an organist to control the volume. Obviously, if you add more stops, you add more sounds, then the volume is going to become louder. So that's also another way of controlling the volume. But one way of controlling the volume is through what we call a swell box. And that basically means if you open the swell box, the shutters are opened, and that means the sound travels further and more easily, which makes it louder. And if you shut the swell box, then the sound is kept within here more closely, and so it doesn't travel as far and it's not as loud. So that's how the sound works. I've shown you the electrical board, so that's how the electricity is sent from the console downstairs and translates to the electrical board up here, and that's how the organ and the pipes up here know how to play which sounds, basically. So it's a very, very complicated piece of kit. So a smaller organ would have less pipes and therefore less sounds at your disposal, but an organ like this, you have hundreds of sounds combined together. So this is the second room. As you can see, I'm not going to take you up to this one, but as you can see, very, very similar to the last room. More pipes, so lots more sounds that you can choose from. As you can imagine, because there's so many pipes, because it's such a complicated piece of kit, it is a very expensive thing to maintain and repair. So they do take a lot of maintenance. Obviously they're very expensive to build as well, not only because of the complicatedness of it, but also because, you know, the knowledge, which I suppose is related to the complicatedness, is that it's very, very specialised knowledge. So not many people actually know what they're doing when it comes to building an organ and repairing an organ and maintaining it. But yeah, it's a mighty piece of kit that's was way ahead of its time, let's say. And some people will call it the original synthesizer, because a synthesizer combines lots of different sounds into one place, obviously electronically, but before you had electricity, it was the organ that had that possibility. So the console is just down there in comparison to where we are now. So yes, obviously the electrical signals have to travel under the floor and up to this side of the abbey. Some stunning side chapels up here as well that not many people get to see. Down we go. So as I said previously, we have 4 manuals on this one, all with different names. We have different sounds on each of the manuals, and these buttons beside me correspond to the different sounds. So one thing also to know is that there's a computer behind here, and you can set different sounds. You can select different sounds, and then once you've selected them, you can actually use a set button down here and set them to a certain piston here. They're called pistons, these buttons here. And you can set different sounds to a certain piston, and when you press that piston, that sound will come up. Obviously I haven't set any sounds. But usually what happens with these different pistons is that as you work up the numbers, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the sound gets louder. So that's something else that allows you to increase the volume. We talked about the shutters upstairs and how if they're opened, the volume gets louder in the church, but also adding different sounds obviously makes it louder as well. So those are the pistons. We also have up here, if you can see, couplers. So couplers allow you to couple or layer different manuals or different sounds on top of each other. So we've got the grate here, and if I want to send all of the sounds that the grate is making to the pedal, which is down here, to the pedals, which I'll talk about briefly in a second. If I want to send those sounds down, then I just press this button here and it's lit up, which means that the sound is being sent to the pedal. So that's a coupler. If I want to send the sounds from the swell, which is over here, the swell, if I want to send the sounds from the swell to the grate manual, so if I want to send the sounds from this manual to this manual, then all I need to do is press swell to grate, and that will couple the sounds from the swell to the grate. If I take it off, basically no sound. So that allows you again to layer different sounds, couple different sounds, and it provides a more coherent kind of glued together sound, because if you've got the grate pedal on, the swells pedal on, the sounds that are coming out from the things that you're playing on your hands are also coming from your feet. So it provides a much more cohesive sound. So the stops here correspond to each manual. So the stops under this manual change the sounds of this manual. Likewise here, and likewise here. But you also have some more stops under here. And if you want to change the sound of the whole organ, you can press one of these. If you take a look at the lights, you'll see that the whole setup changes quite drastically. So you have buttons that not only allow you to change the sounds of each individual manual, but also to change the sounds of the whole organ in its entirety. And again, you can set those with the computer. So now onto the pedals. You might be wondering why organists play with their feet as well. Well, the pedals usually have bass notes played. So whilst you're playing the upper parts with your hands, you also have deeper, bassier notes in the pedals. So it allows you to play the whole range of the sound spectrum, essentially. Pedals play bass notes in general and are very deep in how they sound. You've also got buttons, more pistons around here. So again, like we have with the hands and the manuals up on the keyboards, these change different sounds on the organ. So these are very useful if you don't have your hands free and you're doing too much with your hands. You can just press one with your feet and the sounds will change along with it. You might be able to see some of the different lights coming on, and I'm using my feet. I'm not using my hands at all, I'm just using my feet, and so you can change the different sounds with your feet as well. So these are the swell boxes down here that I talked about earlier, and they control the volume, as I mentioned. So if you open them, they're currently closed, but if you open them, the volume will get louder. I shut them again, and it allows you to control the volume more easily. You've got the grate and the choir here, they're labelled. You've got the grate and the choir, and then you've got the swell and the solo controlled by this one, and then the tuba, specifically the tuba stop, is controlled by this one. So I can play the tuba with it closed, and if I open it, a massive difference in volume. If you take a quick look at the chamber up here to your right, if I open the tuba box, you'll see that the chamber actually opens slightly, and you can see how the shutters are opening and closing. So you can see it in action there. So that's pretty much all there is to know about a pipe organ. I'm going to demonstrate quickly how you can change very, very quickly and efficiently into different genres, and how the organ is very, very versatile. Stick around until the end for a quick bonus bit of content that I'm going to explain. There's actually 3 things here that I haven't actually told you what they're for, so I'm going to show you quickly how you can jump from different genres very, very quickly on the organ and using the different textures and sounds that the organ has. And then I'll provide a little bit of bonus content which explains the last little bit of the organ which I haven't actually talked about. So that was just a very, very brief demonstration, just to show you that you can play classical organ music such as Vidor. You can go into film music, Hans Zimmer's Interstellar, which was originally played on an organ, and then into ABBA's Dancing Queen. So the organ is genreless, and as I said, it's like a synthesizer because you've got all these different sounds at your disposal. Before the video ends, I just want to show you one last little bit of the organ, which is the section over here. So we have firstly the sustainers. So like a synthesizer, there's kind of like a sustain effect that you can use. So if I push the sustainer button on, that's on the choir, so it's on this manual down here. And if I play notes, I don't have to do anything, the notes will play by themselves. And so I can actually use that to my advantage, and I can now play different sounds on a different keyboard whilst this is playing. So that was the introduction to One More Light by Linkin Park, which I arranged recently for organ. That's available on my channel. We've also got a solo one, so if you want to sustain notes on the solo, you can also do that. So again, another sustain feature there. So the next thing we've got is the bombard, which is over here. The bombard. So earlier in the video, I said that it doesn't matter how hard you push down a key, the volume will still be the same. Well, on this organ, the bombard actually changes that, which is why I've left this to the end of the video. So the bombard is actually activated on this organ. Some organs might have the bombard as a completely separate manual, but on this one, if you click this button here, it says bombard to great second, and to great second means that there's actually two layers of the great. So if I just play the great and press it normally, then it has that effect, but if I press it harder, then it's much, much louder, and that's all the bombard sounds that are creating that. So it's a very, very useful thing if you want to have that effect. So that is a very rare circumstance where actually the volume is controlled by how hard you push down, because I'm pushing down doubly hard, really pushing into the keys, and that creates that activates the bombard sound. So that's what the bombard is for. Finally, we have the tremulants. I'm not going to go into those because I haven't ever used them, but tremulant, from the word tremble, similar to the word tremble, it basically makes certain sounds basically tremble and shiver slightly, so it has that kind of wobbly effect. So again, the organ is very similar to music production in that sense, because you are manipulating sounds. You're not just using the sounds and playing them, but you're also manipulating them, with sustainers and with tremulants. Very, very, very powerful piece of kit. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the breakdown. If you've got any more questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them, and I shall see you in the next video.